What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another autumnal landscape scene where we're going to create this well design today with a monochrome background and just the autumnal tones popping with a bit of colour. Now, as always, there's links to the requirements for today's tutorial in the description down below. That will take you to a post over on my Patreon where you can grab the requirements completely for free, again using the link in the description down below. That will give you the canvas size, the guide and the palette. That's all you need for today's design. All the brushes are built into Procreate in the 5.4 update. Now, just a heads up, make sure to also dictate the pace of the video yourself by simply going up to the top right here, tap on the video, go to settings, and then go to playback speed. In case I go too fast, you can always slow me down in the YouTube player here. So yeah, that's just a little tip for all of my videos, to be honest with you. And if you want even more tutorials like this, you can come and check me out over on Patreon, because that's where I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. The catalogue sits at nearly 160 at the time of recording. And again, with 3 added every single month, that catalogue just continues to grow. And also, please be patient with me in this tutorial a little bit. I'm not very well at the time of recording. Throat is a little bit croaky, but we still make it through nonetheless. So enjoy today's tutorial and let's get started. So as always, I've gone ahead, created my canvas. I've also added in my guide, which you can see in my layers. Now, to add in your guide, just go to your actions, hit the option of add and insert a photo or from your files, depending on where you saved it to. And then the only other thing I've done is tapped on the layer, tapped on rename and just called it guide. That way we know where it is in our layers. We know not to delete it throughout our design. So once you've done that, let's go ahead and change our background color. We're going to go ahead and open up the palette and use the color in the bottom right of the palette and hit the tick. Create a new layer, drag it underneath the guide. We're going to go to our brushes. We're going to go to grunge and the mountain lilac brush. I've been using that for all of my backgrounds lately. And then we're going to set the brush size probably to about 88%, maximum opacity. Our color needs to change to the next color up in the palette. So this is typically where I put the background colors and then the foreground content over here. So middle of the far right column. Again, making sure we're on our new layer. We can then start working in the background area. So first stage being up here, nice and large. And then we're just going to sort of trickle in some kind of like diagonal kind of line across the scene just to get us started. Maybe a smidge higher than that. And perhaps the idea of like tapping and pushing in order to kind of create kind of like tree-like shapes. I don't want you to force it. Now I'm going to go left to right all the way, top to bottom, so I can get some patchiness in here and start to really kind of build out the scene a bit more. So just a few more wiggles and wobbles with this color. And then the more you layer it in, the more you get. So you can tap and push and create all the texture that you want by tapping again and pushing. Then go to your colors, grab the top right of the palette, and then we're going to work in even more color. And we're going to kind of push out from this kind of direction here to, again, try and simulate the idea of like a tree in there. Let's maybe bring the brush size down to like a 50% so that just underneath this kind of branch in here, you can tap and push in an outward direction, sort of coming across here as well, trying to, again, give the nod to the fact that there might actually be like a tree here or something like that. And a little bit more color in through there. And you can let that color come across, you know, wiggle your pen, tap and push. Tapping and pushing gets you a more sort of sharp print of the brush itself, but if you wiggle your pen, you'll end up with a softer, almost smudged version. And then I'm just going to darken up into these areas here, just kind of along our path as well. But you can see I'm slowly trying to sort of bring this out a little bit in a sense of just making sure that it's got like a good amount of sort of darkness in behind it and leaving this area up here. We then go ahead and move into our layers and create a new layer. And then we're going to go to our colors and move to this color here, the top of the second column from the right. I've put it on a separate layer because we're going to be quite concentrated with it in a way. So here in this space here, I want you to push outwards. You could probably go a bit smaller if you wanted to, maybe like a 35%, and just kind of push outwards to, again, give the kind of nod that there is like a bit of a tree here. So start on like the outer edges and then just keep tapping and pushing outwards. Leave gaps though, like a little bit of light popping through is perfectly fine, but just as you sort of want to, you can just keep pushing out to create the nod of a tree. You know, it doesn't need to be perfect in any way, shape or form, so much so that like when I get down to here, I'm going to fill in this area of the bush, which will be a darker color in a minute, but just want to get some color in there. I'm going to come sort of down there, create like a tree trunk almost in there, and then up here I'm going to go back up to the 50% because again we're going to push up and outwards we want to create a tree, and this is a much darker color, so you are going to quite easily be able to add in some darkness up here. And then we're going to use this color to also start to just layer in some like basic color in our design here. So like inside our little wishing well here, probably around about 35%. You just want to kind of dash in some color in here, maybe, and it trickles over into the right where it gets a bit darker again, and you can come down the poles here, for example, and just, you kind of get in like a bit of a background in, and then obviously there's a gap in the middle, and I want you to kind of bring your pen across to again create bushes, etc., that we can kind of see through our little wishing well. A little bit across, I say wishing well, that's the fantasy version, isn't it? And then we'll go across kind of the main sort of stony base there. We'll bring in some darkness out on the edge, like a bit of a bush almost, like very close, some greenery into like a plane of ground down here. Again, a little bit sort of darker up to here. I'll give you an option to pause in just a second so you can get an idea for where I'm layering in the color. I'm going to go ahead and again start to use this brush now to just layer in like a basic idea of a bush, trying to keep it underneath that line just to start with. And then I'll sort of shadow behind there, and then our path is like an S shape, so you can, like, you know, do a couple more strokes in there if you want to try and get that little zigzag kind of shaping. And then probably bring your brush size down to like a 15% if you really want to be quite detailed with it. But ultimately, to be honest with you, that's where you want to be for the first layer of color. And then we actually want to go ahead, and you can do it on the same layer, but I urge you to actually create a separate layer. Go to your brush, change it to pens, Elphinstone, and then just over here I've always got a marker of 32%. You can just create like a tree trunk in this area here, and then just sprout off, create branches, and just try and give like a little bit more detail to it. Now you don't even have to attach branches, like you can just let branches just like come and go and just reappear throughout the whole of the tree. So like you can see, like some of my lines there, they do not attach at all, but as long as you get your little tree trunk in there and it kind of stop a little bit just in this area here, you might be able to get some nice little bit of structure in there, and just, you know, a nod to a tree. Every time I'm doing these autumnal kind of styles, I'm trying to see what I can do that's a little bit different in the next approach, because that's always the best way to do it. Let's then go ahead and go to our layers again. Let's create another new layer. Let's go to our colors, and we'll move into this darker tone, the middle now of the second column from the right. We'll go back to our brush. Again, we want to go up to recent. We can just go to Mountain Lilac. And again, just up here, probably with a size of around about 14%, we're just going to kind of push outwards to create, again, like a nod of a tree. And this one's going to get, again, a little bit darker, and that's fine. We need this top area here to look a little bit darker. That's fine. And then you can squiggle, you can wiggle, and you can tap and push. They are genuinely the approaches that you need. About 25%, I can just go a little bit larger now, keep pushing up and outwards just to create like a little bit more definition in there. And then I'm just going to keep tapping and pushing around the well here as well, because I want this to get a little bit darker in here. Likewise, like a little bit more darkness down here, because that's where our tree trunk's going to be. So you can just wiggle in like a little bit more darkness there. I want this little area over here to the right hand side of the well to also have like some growths in here in a second. So I'm going to just layer in some color. And then I'm also going to start laying the foundations, about 18% on the brush size, just for down here, where we can, if you let go every single time, you'll actually layer your pen on top of itself. You can see like they overlap and you get like double tones. So you can use that to your advantage by doing like one coat and then letting go and then doing another coat. And again, just like tapping and pushing to create like patchiness, because the ground's never going to be perfect. And then just one more lighter coat perhaps just in towards the pathway, because we actually need to go ahead and darken up underneath the path in a second. But for now, I just want to get like a randomness of a sorted colour in there. So we'll leave that for just a second there. And then we'll move over to this bush-like shape here. Going to do exactly the same kind of fashion, about 20% I reckon, just push up and out, maybe just to get us started, maybe go a bit smaller. Then around about 13, 20 to 13. That's fine. I want the main body over here to be fairly dark, but you want the edges of your bush there to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to keep pushing up and out, and then I'm just going to very lightly around the base just kind of darken it up, basically creating like a shadow in there, and also some flat land as well. So I'm just going to bring that down, bring the size down to like an 8%, get some unevenness in the ground around it, and just kind of just push out a few little purposeful little dashes. And you know, if your bush is starting to look just too flat and too consistently like the same color, just get in there now with some additional taps just to darken it up quite a bit. We can always add more later on, but just want to get some taps in there as well. That's looking good. Happy with the color of that. We are then going to switch back to the elphinstone though, because just like we've done in previous tutorials, and while we're on the layer, 32% brush size, I just want you to get in here then and just start adding in some like purposeful like leaves towards the edges and the body as well, to be fair. You know, just like it's a balance between like vagueness of detail and then purposeful shaping to create the illusion of detail. So it's like in here we can do lots of little taps and little bits here and there to create the idea that like a certain leaf perhaps is getting quite a lot of attention. It's quite sharp in our design, and then the rest is all just like fuzzy and a bit hazy, and that's fine. We want that kind of, hang on a minute, there's a little bit more detail there than meets the eye kind of vibe, but you know, it's subtle. Look at that. That's all you need to do for this particular section. So take your time to kind of work towards this kind of goal. Okay, so we're going to now work on the ground. So we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to work in the top left of the palette. So we're getting very, very dark now, top left of the palette. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush. We're going to change it though. We want the Biceno brush. So if I find that for you, it is in the category creative and the Biceno. We're then going to set our brush size to about 20%. First thing we're going to do, push up and outwards here to create our main focal area kind of bush-like shape here. So you can press really lightly and go all over. Different angles will look fantastic. You know, push it in all sorts of directions just to generally create the kind of bush shape. And then you can press a bit firmer as you get towards the bottom left-hand corner, because that's where the density will build up compared to like the edge, of course. And then you can really just pack this in down here nice and dark, where the bush and the greenery, etc., is really dense. You let all of that color just kind of fade out towards the edges where the light just peers through. But ultimately, again, you want that dark corner anyway. And this whole area is going to get much, much darker now. For example, over here, we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to start layering in some lovely darkness in this corner over here. And that is going to kind of bring itself down and in towards where the path is, which we are going to darken. So we're going to also add in some like scattering of color. And look, you can see how I'm trying to like scatter the brush at the same time. So maybe like a 7's too small, around about 12%. There you go. I'm pushing it up to create like the idea of greenery, and then I'm leaving gaps in between because we like those little light grays just to pop through occasionally. You know, and we'll add in some more like growth as if it's like growing over the path down here. And then with the Biceno, again, if you just hold down and you keep doing it in one brush stroke, you can just darken up and create this lovely little soft approach. The Biceno is really useful because, again, you can create these lovely little sort of speckled effects, but at the same time, if you, again, you hold down and just sort of very lightly just blend and do it in one motion, you can create lovely amounts of soft texture at the same time. So you really can just like utilize it with different techniques. It looks really fun. So again, we're like layering in that lovely natural growth around the base of our well, and you can just push up a little bit more color like here, just right up the edge. There we go. And then we do need to, as I say, kind of add some color to the pathway. So 20% seems a bit large, but we'll try it. We want to do it in one brush stroke, of course, so that we get that smoother effect. So in here, like one really light sort of run through, varying up your color, and then allowing that to kind of fade off round in the distance there. You know, you can layer it in, get kind of close to your edges. You can always like detail them up in a second anyway. And to be honest, it needs to get even darker than this. So I'm still doing one brush stroke, but I'm trying not to sort of fill it all in consistently. You know, I want there to be patches of grey rather than complete black. And we'll bring the path back out in a second anyway. So for now, just like don't stress over it. It's going to, it's all come back to life in a second. So I've let go finally, and then I could probably get in here and layer in a bit more darkness. But I've got these variations in the tones. So we'll have this on a separate layer anyway, so we can always go ahead and darken it up a bit more. I'm going to tap and push though, just so I can bring this grass, like, and this grassy area around the base of our well a bit more into play. So if I bring that back down to like a 7%, I can just keep pushing this a little bit more with a bit more purpose and also a bit more pressure, just to kind of darken up the grass, just to show that there's a difference in kind of almost material. So 13%, I'm just going to wiggle again to bring in this like overlapping bit of grass here almost, these growths. And then I can always push here as well from our bush back over the top of the greys. Although if you leave a little bit of kind of this light tone here, it nicely separates it. It already looks like it's got speckles of highlight and we've not even had to do it. It's like a sort of hack almost. And then super lightly back here, I'm just going to create like a bit of a transition of these greys into one another. I'm going to go down to 7%. Just to create like unevenness and patchiness over here, and then maybe a tad more back there as well. There we go. But you want to focus again the majority of your darkness right here at the front of the scene. But there we go. Awesome. So that's looking really cool. It's coming together nicely. Let's then start to work on details, which I love at the minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another new layer. We'll go to our color brush, should I say. You can go to the top and recent, because we've now used a couple of brushes that we need, and one of which is the Elphinstone. And then using the brush and the color again, top left of the palette, I want you to get into here with a 32% brush size. You can turn your guide down. I wouldn't necessarily turn it off because I want you to use it as like a guide, of course. 41% here is the opacity for me. But on this new empty layer, I'm just going to go ahead and create blades of grass running through this area here, wild growth all over, you know, down into the gaps, coming in from the edge of the scene, little flicks. What you're trying to do is just let the pressure get really light, because this brush you can press really firm, but if you press really, really, really light, you get lovely little sort of thin lines. And that's all I'm doing is I'm just very lightly flicking it on the screen. If you struggle with pressure sensitivity, you may have to just reduce the size of the brush, for example. Just make it a little bit smaller. Take your time. And we are going to fill out this area. We're also then going to make our way over towards the right-hand side and add in like detail. And as always, the other thing to do is then also do some taps. You know, like this is like a blade of grass, but it's potentially like some sort of plant and has some sort of flowers on it potentially, or leaves, like anything that we want to add to our scene. So I'm going to go ahead and just like purposely curate like a few blades of grass that I can then dance some detail onto. You can do all the detail like in here. The longer you can spend on this as well, the better it will look. And then we'll do another one like down here too. Lovely little bits of growth. And we do have light tones to add in a minute. We also have medium tones as well. So you're really going to be able to fill this out with detail. So don't do like all of your detail immediately just with this dark tone. Let's then reintroduce some more. Now you can make your brush size a bit smaller, like a 13, to get some really lovely like variations in the grass. Like I'm making my way through here now, just literally just quick flicks of the pen, almost scribbling, to be honest with you. But we've got these lovely thinner variations in the grass, which will just eventually just catch enough on the screen that you'll just see like a few hairs of some thin detail. And getting it all the way into the corner as well. You know, don't be afraid to get some in there, but you don't need to fill out the entirety of it just yet. Like I said, we've got the lighter tones to introduce in just a second. I will make my way back over to here with a 32% brush size again, and then I'm just going to make my way sort of around the base of our well here, trying to give the idea again that there's like growth of grass or plant. It doesn't really matter. As I've said in like previous versions of this, like I'm not trying to necessarily tell you that this is a particular plant or anything like that. It's just wild natural growth that's like, it's a style I'm just enjoying at the minute, where I've just sort of found like a sort of medium where I'm just giving you the nod of detail, not necessarily having to, you know, depict necessarily what it is, what type of plant it is, etc. It's just a matter of just creating the illusion of detail almost. Again, like letting the Baceno and letting the mountain lilac like fill in the background area for you, give you some like patchiness and randomness, and then you can get in here and just dash in purposeful lines, etc. So you see I went all the way to the edge. I also then added a little bit here too. And I will continue to just find little sort of patches here and there that I can add some detail to, little flicks of grass and whatnot. And we'll probably add a few more like in a second anyway, like once we get towards probably the latter stages, to be honest with you, of the tutorial, where like I'll get my final adjustments in there. Over here on the right, again, it's quite important that we want to get some nice growth in there, just to show like round the back of the well has just been left to kind of just grow like crazy and wild. And down here, to be honest with you, this is probably a little bit too light, to be honest, down in this point, but we'll roll with it for now. So I'm just creating some larger grass. Sometimes they are literally like up and down zigzags, and then because they're all clustered together, it doesn't really matter. You can't really tell, you know, that they are just like zigzags of like one continuous like up and down scribble almost. You can see as well, even when I lift my pen off of the screen, I've still got my hand doing the same motion. It's almost like it's like, I don't know, it's locked in. It knows exactly what it's meant to be doing right now, and just like I've turned on a machine almost in my hand, and it's just growing and creating all this detail throughout the whole of the scene. Now in some of your sort of mini areas here in the gaps, just add in like a few little scrapes of something, just so you've got something to work with. You know, you can see all the detail running through, you know, even down into like here. And I definitely think I need to darken up this corner because those grassy blades are quite dark. We'll think about it, we'll come back to it, we'll see how it rolls out for the rest of the scene. As always, just like before, little sort of taps of like growth will look fantastic. You know, like give yourself like one or two like larger blades. They look pretty good when you can just like let one just grow a little bit higher, and that one gets all the attention with all the taps of all like the leaves and, you know, the flowering, etc. Now this particular design, of course, is just going to be like grayscale pretty much, and then the only thing we're going to use some colour in, of course, is just the autumnal leaves. And autumn right now for me this year has been particularly fun, like trying to work out the best way to sort of use the autumnal colours, and this one is probably one of my favourites because of the fact that we just have nothing but grey up until the point in which we then introduce the lovely orange tones, and it's like the colour pop effect where you let just one colour just show on the screen only, and the rest of it again is just black and white. It's actually a photography style as well. So I'm really happy with how that's going so far. I then want to go ahead and go to my colours and grab the middle of the first column. You then do exactly the same, except now you're in like a medium grey. So essentially if you now draw over your darker tones, like which we did before on the layer below, you'll be able to see now this like medium grey. It's not to say as well, you can't just tap on top of some of your like your little growths here. Likewise, even your full like blades of grass, to be honest with you. Just keep the pressure nice and thin, of course. But you can also introduce like more growths in here now, but with like the grey colour, because you can now see them a lot more. So you can just like create like a few more stems and then like a bit more growth on them. We have a lighter colour after this one to introduce as well. So that will really bring it out, but you're just sort of layering it in at the minute. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not, and that's fine. You don't need to necessarily constantly always see every single colour and every single element, but just a little bit of like a bit of attention running up some of these, like adding in like the leaves on some of them will look great. A couple more like little petals running up here. Sometimes you don't even need to connect them. You can just have them like run astray and that looks lovely. We'll then get into here as well, because there's a little bit of light coming from behind, of course, behind the well. This bottom right corner is particularly dark, so I'm going to get in here now, put in some greys in here as well. On top of the white tone in the background, it will make it really prominent. And you can get in there, you can like do it in the blades as well, like in the clusters of your grass. You know, just a few more grey tones just to break it up. Lovely. It's coming together nicely. I don't think we're going to do much over here, to be honest with you. Maybe just a few little sort of flicks of like a grey on this little cluster here, maybe a couple on there, but we'll leave that in the shadows. And again, we'll go to our colours, bottom left of the palette now, even brighter, as I said. And then these ones, they will look very kind of white, but they will give you that beautiful contrast in here. So you get like these lovely bright tones go up and down some of your leaves again from your blades that you introduced, and you know, make sure that they've got loads of variation in colours and highlight and texture basically. And again, get in there, maybe focus a little bit more of your sort of lighter lines up towards the edge, but I could definitely do with after this just, you know, adding in a few more darker tones underneath this layer so that these light tones now that I'm introducing will be way more prominent. But for now, you know, they'll do. Maybe a couple of like little flicks here, like in the body of the like bushy green area down here is fine. That looks good. And then again, we'll do some more over here because that light is coming in from behind. We can add in some more blades, a couple more dashes up some of those leaves and plants, a couple more on here too, letting that light come into this area, letting it just bathe in these little sort of areas. A couple more little flicks off from here, I reckon. Some very, very tiny ones. Lovely. Awesome. That's nice and colourful, nice and detailed. I say colourful, it's not colourful in any sense, is it? But you know what I mean. Maybe just a few super light ones over here just to pluck out a few little blades of grass, but I think that's okay for now. Now, just so we can add some variation to here, I'm going to create a new layer again. I'm going to go to my colours and grab the middle of the first column. I'm going to go back to my brush in the Baceno, so I'm in recent, of course. Got the size set to 7%. I'm just going to very lightly just sort of get in there and create like a lighter grey, just like ever so slightly, just running through to create patchiness and variation even more than what I did before. So this one should just like soften up the ground a little bit, but also give me some idea of the ground as well. It's very, very subtle. Now, optionally, you can then also come over to here and create like a rock in here as well. Now, I urge you to put it on a separate layer, but if you continue with this middle grey, you can just like create like the top surface of like a rock and then maybe like a little line coming down the edge. There you go, look at that. All that was a horizontal line, another slight diagonal, and then a line down. And then if you go to your colours and you grab the bottom left of the palette, and then just on the top edge of your Brock, I need to say Brock, that's a Pokemon trainer, isn't it? A little bit of light tone just on the top of the rock here, just to kind of just highlight it a little bit. And then you go, it's very, very simple, but it's just like a simple kind of extra addition into our scene. Now, let's go ahead and add in the actual stones here. So if we go to our colours and go again and grab the middle of the first column, I do want to again put this on a separate layer. I always like to separate things because it gives you maximum flexibility later on. I'm going to put it just here in front of the ground and create a new layer. So we've got these extra ones above. Now, these ones down here, these four, if you want to, just group them together, and then that's your background. So you can turn it on and off, for example. So just call it, rename it, and just call it BG for background, and then collapse that down. So on this layer here, just in front of our ground, we're going to create our little cobbled kind of street here. So probably around about 7%. You kind of want to start to, I don't know, maybe a bit bigger, maybe 12. Just kind of draw in like greyish tiles here. And they don't need to be like perfect or even or like, you know, like they can be like odd sizes as well, like all the way into like this bottom corner. But down here, you kind of want the, again, the path to kind of fade out and just trickle out. So as you make your way a little bit further back here, they want to, of course, get a little bit shorter in height, very quickly almost as well. And you don't have to fill out the entirety of it. Like, so I'm just creating like little rectangular, like little patches running through. And then we'll do some more a little bit further back. But then as they get further back, you just let that colour and you let the detail really just fall off very quickly. And like it kind of does it itself because you kind of lose it to like the greys back here. It's not to say you can't set your brush size very small and like detail like a little bit as it makes its way round the well, but ultimately these are the kind of shapes that you want to be looking for. Perhaps like I could add one in there too, maybe shape that one up a little bit. And you see I've left like the gaps in between, and that's fine. You do want to kind of just make sure you push like the tiles a bit closer together because we can do more to actually sort of separate them in a second. So let's then go to our colours. Let's then grab the bottom left of the palette. So this is even lighter, don't forget. And then you kind of want to go on the top edge of one of your tiles, very lightly with your pressure. Try and do it in one brush stroke if possible, because then you get that smudge effect. And then there you go, just a little bit of highlight on that top edge. And you can kind of bring out the shape of your tiles a little bit. Now, it's not to say you need to do all of them with that additional lighting, but if you can keep it more patchy, it will look good and it will add to the texture of the whole rest of the scene. So I've done like a couple down here with that like streaky effect, the ones that are a bit closer to us. And then I'm going to sort of go back over them, patch in like a little bit of highlight here on that top edge of the stone as it wraps its way away from us and disappears. Some get a little bit lighter, some are a little bit more prominent. And then you may have to make up a few as they sort of disappear around the corner there, just to again bring that highlight down and onto some of our little cobbled stones here. So I'm going to go a bit bigger, 12%. And honestly, the whole thing about today is a lot of sort of this tutorial is about texture, like texture, like giving the nod of texture. I'm gonna have to be very, very light with this one over here, because I want that one to kind of really fade out towards the corner of our scene here, and then a little bit darker there, or lighter, sorry. A couple more patches on them just to bring them out a bit more. And then you can go to your colors. You can grab the darker tone, top left of the palette, set your size to like a 7%, and then you can just like, again, kind of just run over the top of them with some variation, maybe a bit bigger again, like 11%. There's like a few like variations in darkness. I'm going to go even bigger, sorry, 13%. And then just a few more patches over the top of them to create texture and variation. So even on top of your shadows, your highlights, sorry, you can just layer in some darkness. There we go, a little bit more on top of those, giving them like a rougher edge to them. Very simple kind of path in a way. Now, one thing we can do is we first of all want to go back down to the ground underneath it, because I still believe that this isn't dark enough. So with a brush size of 20%, we're on the layer below. I'm going to darken up quite a bit more, like in these gaps, because we need the shadows in a second to like really make these stones look good. So I'm just going to sort of darken up, especially down into here. And then what you want to do is grab your layer that you were working on before, grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and use the pen and elfin stone. And then the top edge here of a stone, just trim it. Trim the shape of it. And then you can even run it in the gaps as well, like in the middle. So here, I'm going to trim the edge, 32% brush size as always. Let's go for, and then let's just trim that. And what you're doing is you're creating like the definitive edge of the top of this one, but not so much the one in front, behind it, because that kind of fades down into the earth below. So you're just saying, right, I'll sharpen off the edge there. I'll round this one off a little bit more. I'll come across here too, and a few of them towards the back. You can kind of sharpen them up a little bit, but you don't need to do that much, to be honest with you. And then here, like we'll do like a bit of a sharper cutaway. So they almost look like little slabs almost, just sort of laying in the ground. Then I urge you to go ahead and go back to your brush and use the Paceno again. And then we'll just kind of use the dark tone again, just to kind of hack away at some of them. Even more so, just to kind of give them that patchiness. Now here, I've kind of only got like one massive one there. So I could probably do with like a 7% brush size of kind of just cutting through there. There we go, just to create like another one and space them out a little bit. And don't be afraid to get like in those channels, like above your dark line that you just used to like erase from them, and create a shadow on the very edge of those tiles, because the stones, we don't want them to be even for a start, and like we want them to be worn and, you know, been in here for a while. And then you also want to go ahead and, you know, just show that like they're in like a random lovely assortment and like arrangement. So 13% is just about sort of trickling away, hacking away onto some of them. You can really kind of, to be honest with you, just like find one and just really like attack it with the darkness to kind of bury it in the ground a bit more. As long as you get some kind of texture, you're okay. And variation, should I say. So I'm tapping and pushing down now, just to kind of create an edge profile almost of some of these tiles in here. And I keep saying tiles, but they're more like bricks, I guess. Pushing downwards on the edge, there we go, like this. Pushing down to create a little bit of height in them at the same time. Lovely. That's looking much better, much more worn, much more sort of part and cohesive of the scene. I could probably do about chipping away at this one, to be honest, and making just like a bit of grass kind of layer on top of it as well. That's always something we can come back to. It's not necessarily definitive to the end of our scene, but we will carry on now into the well. So I'm going to bring the guide back up to 100%. We are going to go ahead and tap on the layer below it and create a new layer. And I do then want to go ahead and drag that down so that it sits just underneath all those like grassy blades that we created earlier, like our detail layer. From on this layer, I want you to go to your colors and grab the top of the third column. Brush wants to be Elphinstone again, 32%, same as before. We're just going to create the full silhouette. So I'm going to sort of use the pressure of the pen. I'm going to come down into there. And as I use the pressure, I'm like just ever so slightly tapping occasionally with a tiny bit more pressure, because I don't want this to be almost like a monoline kind of line where it looks like it's super sharp. These are bricks. These are like stones, should I say. Like they are uneven, and we want that. Now, there is a line here, but that's actually a tree in the background. So you don't need to do that one. You can just come across to this column here, make your way down this column here of wood. So we're going to come down here like so. And then from there, we're going to go across here, and you can see even here I've like, I'm pressing occasionally with like a little bit more pressure, again to create like uneven shapes. Then across here, I'm going to come down here again, just like random occasional bits of higher pressure for something of detail, and then up and down here. You can see I've created like little bumps actually in the guide as well to show like the slate at the top here down, across and down. We'll come across here, we'll come down this line, across, oh, one too many there, and then we'll come down here, down the wood column, come across, and then down for the edge. Of course, then we need to also do the inside as well, so you just need to make your way across this line here. There we go. We can come down at the column again, and then we'll come across the top of this beam here. You kind of do need to create like a bit of a tiny triangular cut here, so just follow that line up, and then just to under there you go, you'll just have a little triangular cutout in that space. In fact, mine probably needs to be a bit smaller than that. We then come across the underside of the roof to the opposite side, again like varying little sort of random taps of additional pressure. Then you should be able to drag and drop your colour in. Again, don't worry about this right hand side. We're going to add a tree there in a minute, so it'll be completely hidden. In fact, that's actually the next step. So we're going to go ahead and tap below the layer, create a new layer, and then kind of repeat the same steps. So we're going to come up and across here to create like another tree-like shape, just coming into this space here, which definitely tells me as well, like because of this dark tone coming into here on its own, this area needs to be a lot darker. And I can do that in a minute, that's no stress. I'm going to come down this line, down our tree trunk that sits right in behind our well. This is the main tree trunk here. It goes right behind that column, and if I link them together, I can drag and drop the colour into the middle of it. So this tree just kind of hides the rear column at the same time, and I could probably sort of widen that up a tiny bit. Let's do that again. There we go. From there, you can branch off, pun intended this time. You can create branches off of there. Really light pressure, and then just gradually get heavier with how much pressure you're applying onto the screen. Don't go too mad, of course, but just creating branches running across your screen, little branches here and there, just scattering all over the place. Let them run up, some horizontal, some coming in from behind, and I always say overlap your brush, your branches. That's where it looks the best. Some people keep things so flat and boring. Overlap things. Have a branch come in from here and then just go whoop all the way up towards the top. There we go. It's just natural. It looks so much better, and you get the real look of a beautiful big tree in there. Now I'm also then just going to kind of run like another one off from there, I think, just a little bit higher. Now you've got your tree, you've got the well. We also on this layer though want to go ahead and use this brush here. I'm going to swipe it to the left and find it for you. It's the Deep North brush, and it's in grunge. It's at the very top. And then you want to set your size. I've got it set. We probably want to be a bit smaller, like a 10%. And you want to tap and push outwards. These are going to be some leaves at the very back of our scene. So that when I say very back of our scene, they are like in behind what will be our beautiful autumnal tones in here. So tapping and pushing along some of your branches to create leaves. And they want to go at all different angles, mind you. So don't just do horizontal, have some pointing down, some pointing up. And don't do too many necessarily as well, because this is just like a backdrop in behind, again, what will be our main feature of all of the beautiful autumnal colours. Now we've kind of got multiple things. We've got a feature of a well, but we've also got the the autumnal tones as well. So we've got a few different sort of things happening, which looks great. Now we are then going to go to the middle of the third column again and just push out a little bit more of these, but these are grey now, so you can even overlap some of your previous leaves if you wish to like change their colour from black to grey. And again, this will just give you some more colour tone in here. I've been using this brush lately to just detail and thicken trees up with leaves multiple times now, and it's a great brush. You can kind of get the nod of some leaves quite easily. The understanding of them is great. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. I could probably like create a bit more density up here, just like right on the very edge of my scene. Keep pushing. Maybe a few more up the very top there, but all in all, that's pretty good for now. We'll leave it as it is. So the next step is to go to the well. We're going to create a new layer and tap on it and clipping mask it to the well. We're then going to go to our colours and again, grab the middle of the third column. Your brush wants to go back to recents and we want the Elphinstone, 32% brush size. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pluck out things that we need to kind of detail. So for example, the top up here, if we start with this top area here, I need to go ahead and kind of just draw in where the light's landing. So I'm not quite going to that bottom pink line you can see there. I'll then colour in the top of it just temporarily. Go all the way across it. Don't worry if you get little patches, that's perfectly fine. And then you can use your eraser if you hold down on it to create then like little gaps. So where I've got these little bumps in my design for you, in my little stencil guide, they can just act as like little cutouts for what will be the slate up here. So if I turn off my guide for you, you can see we end up with like this nod to where all the light's landing, and anything else that we just erased or left as dark is now a shadow. So we can put that into play in multiple areas. So I've turned my guide back on and I'm back to my brush. I'm going to go ahead and draw in a horizontal line from this corner here. You see how it goes up and out? I want to come across pretty just like horizontal all the way to like the edge over here, and then I'll come up here. I'm not going to go up to, or sorry, above the pink line here, because that's obviously a shadow for the slate above. You know, all the way across and then down the very edge as well, and link them together and drag and drop the colour in. And then we'll do that all the way down. So you leave the shadow, the overhang of the slate above, you leave a gap, you then go from that corner again all the way across, two parallel lines basically, and you can see that they're not straight, and then connect them on the ends, drag and drop the colour in, and then again you come from the underside of the slate above, from the corner all the way across, and then link them together and link them together and drag and drop the colour. Just triple check you've not got too much of a kind of wild bit of variety in here. I mean, a little bit of variety, to be honest with you, will look great, but nothing too mental. And then just like before, we'll go to our eraser. We'll set our eraser to Elphinstone and pens, tap away. And then you want to start drawing in some of your slate lines here. So varying, I'm kind of going ever so slightly to the left of that line above. And they need to probably be a bit more vertical than that. I'm just trying to get the angle right. So a little bit sort of pointing downwards. They can vary in thicknesses. They can vary completely. That's no problem. That, if anything, that adds character. And then a little bit across there too. So that gives you a first row of your slates. And then you can start to work in the gap and then create maybe like a little bit of a sort of more pointed outward angle towards the bottom, so that they kind of flick outwards towards the bottom. And then you ultimately just repeat that top line right at the very bottom. So you kind of create like a bit of a straight line almost all the way down, except they vary outwards and they don't have to look like perfect or uniformed in any way. Zoom all the way out. That's all it's meant to look like. And you can add more in there, to be honest with you, or less. It's totally up to you. Now, then we go ahead and we grab our pen again and we start bringing other things back into the light. And it's only a mild amount of light. So underneath here, it's all dark. We're not interested. Here, though, you want to kind of bring in a little bit of colour down here. So I'm just going to turn my guide down for you so you can just see my work with the grey. So just triple checking I am on the right layer. I am. And then I'm going to just bring in like the side profile of that piece of wood. I'll then add in like a bit of light on here too. And then obviously as it sort of goes and tucks underneath the roof, it just loses its lighting like so. So just a few little lines there to kind of blend it out or fade it out almost. You can get pretty close up towards this top edge, like so. And then you want to go ahead and do the same on the right column as well. So you kind of drawing a bit of grey coming down into there. Little kind of nod towards some like woodish grain, but like a flat column almost. There you go. And because you just let those like shadows just stay in there, you're already like one step ahead. And then we do the same kind of process for this side profile here. We're not going to do the top profile just yet. So we're going to kind of bring in some grey. And again, as you kind of wrap round and you get round towards the right hand side, those colours need to fade off. So that can just be your pen getting a lot thinner. That's fine. So if I just colour that in and I go ahead and turn off my guide for you, you can see how they just kind of fade out into the darkness over here. Now, just like before though, we do need to go ahead and bring the guide back in. We're going to grab our eraser and we're going to start adding in some stones here. Now, based off of the fact that this is rounded, the middle stones, if I erase into them to start with, want to be kind of like a little bit bigger. And then as you get gradually more towards the edge over here, the gaps in between are going to get a little bit tighter as perspective kind of wraps around the edge there. So you can see the ones in the middle are a little bit wider. And then I'm going to go into here, chop through that shadow, but ultimately you'll lose them anyway. That just helps you wrap those little tiles. I keep saying tiles, don't I? Sorry. Helps you wrap them round onto the opposite side. As I've probably said already or in the intro, I'm not very well at the time of recording, so if I start to go a bit loopy from this point onwards, you know why. Now we're going to go ahead and tap on the well below and create another new layer. We're going to go to our brush and change it. We want to go ahead and change it, I reckon, to the Baceno brush. We don't need to go into there. So Baceno, set the size to 20%, and this left-hand side over here, we want to do a similar process. So you're kind of going up and down, and then probably, like, again, 20%, you could probably go like across now, start to wrap, kind of roll around the texture, around and into there. Maybe get a little bit softer on the right-hand side where you can kind of use the brush and blend it out, but you're just adding texture to here, making sure you leave that overhanging shadow, and again the right hand side starts to get a little bit darker. And now the difference is we're actually going to go ahead and create a new layer again. We're going to go to our color and go top of the third column, which is the same color as the base tone. We're going to go ahead and go back to our recent brush and our elfin stone again, and then you're just going to go ahead and create multiple repeating, not wobbly, but you don't want them to be perfect either, lines that kind of wrap round. You want to get a little bit of a dip in the middle and then go all the way off to the right. And then again, like a little bit of a dip towards the middle so that they get a little bit bigger, and then a little bit thinner towards the edge. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit thinner on the edge. So the gap, I mean, is a little bit thinner here, a little bit taller here. Just so you can get, again, that kind of bit of perspective. And you can see there, I made that bottom one really chunky. I didn't hate it, to be honest with you, but it kind of came a bit too close to the ground. And then as long as you keep doing those and they look pretty parallel to each other, you can then just go like between the lines and create all sorts of like brickish kind of shapes or stones and varying kind of shapes in here. They do not need to be perfect. If anything, I urge you to kind of make them a bit wonky here and there. Like some have like a little chip in them like that. As long as they kind of, the stone below kind of falls underneath the middle point, you're pretty much okay, to be honest with you. And then over on the edge, those sort of details want to start to get a little bit more condensed, and they maybe a little bit thinner with your lines towards the very left hand side. But in my pre-practices, you should have seen some of the shapes. They were crazy. Like they were like at angles like this, you know, way more random and like worn and just not perfect or uniformed in any shape or form. I loved having like the unusualness of like a few that were just a bit rogue in there. And I do urge you to do that, you know, get some in there that are a little bit different. And then up underneath here as well, you do need to get them right up and under. There we go. And then I reckon like we could go a bit rogue again, like a bit of a diagonal one there. And then we're losing it all off to the shadows on the right now anyway, so we are good and you're fine. Now, at this point, you can then start to also, like, if you want to, like, create cracks, like running through some bricks here and there. Like, I don't urge you to do it absolutely everywhere, but you know, some cracks will look fantastic, especially if you can create those little triangle like chips. I think they look the best. You give yourself a little bit more, especially on this left hand side, to actually work with in a second. I'm going to create another little crack across there. Maybe that one's actually got a fairly large one. I quite like that. And then we go to the layer below. I'm going to create a separate layer. I always like to be a bit more preserved. I'm going to go to my colors and grab the bottom of the, the middle, of the fourth column. Again, brush, you can pick and choose. I mean, the Baceno is very good for this. So let's use that. Let's carry on. Let's set the size to around about 13%. And we're trying to now sort of dictate a little bit more lighting over on this left-hand side. So let's get that brush size at 10%. And in fact, no, let's go bigger. Let's go bigger up to 32 or whatever it is. And just somewhat create like a bit of a gradient over here of lighting that kind of wraps around and kind of blends down into like that bottom area there. And get a little bit more of that, like really pack it in over there and let that kind of just trickle its way across. Tap and create texture, just like we did at the bottom. Tap and push to create like little taps of texture here and there. In some, even if they're in like a bit of a shady spot, it just creates a little bit more something to look at. So a little bit of texture, tapping away. We can always add shadows again in a second anyway, so that's not something we need to worry about if you add too much lighting. So you're bringing that light across just ever so slightly into the scene, and then we can go to our colors and go to the bottom of the third column. Brush size probably around about that 7% marker, so you can now start to purposely kind of detail like the ones on the very edge. Turn off your guide as well, just in case that's like interfering with your vision of the edge over here. There we go. And I could probably go down to like a 4% and even like, you know, detail like the top edges over here of like some much needed kind of highlight detail. Like, there we go. Like just adding in like the edge of some of your little stones in there. Definitely like way over here, you can like really brighten up some of the tiles. Oh God, why do I keep saying tiles? The bricks, the stones. You know what I mean? I do apologize. I'm, again, not very well at the time of recording, but the content still needs to be made. So I'm just going to keep going and bringing that highlight kind of around a little bit more, just onto the top edges perhaps of some of the stones down that edge. Let's go to 7%, tap a few times just to create a little bit lighter texture in some of these stones. That's nice. Nice and randomly assorted as well, like unpositioned. And then you can go ahead and just shadow as well if you want to. So you can put it on a separate layer. I urge you to put it on a separate layer. Go to your colors and grab the top of the third column. Brush size like 7%. You probably want to darken up here. Now, this tells me immediately as well that my ground here is not dark enough around the base of this, because it all needs to kind of just blend into darkness. So what you want to do now is probably 7 to 4%, the bottom edge of some of your stones you want to be shadowing. So like the bottom edge over here, especially like on some of these stones, we can darken up, creating a much more 3D look to them. And then the right side of some of them as well, you can do as well, as they kind of blend into what would be like, not the concrete, I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but you know, the sticky concrete like material in between. So we just add in a bit of shadow towards the bottom of those, maybe even like a few more random patches of shadow throughout the whole of this, especially like towards the bottom where maybe it's got a bit messy with all like the growths over it over time. But again, you've got that lovely highlight coming across, and then you can just shadow out, to be honest with you, over on that right hand side, like 20%, just triple check that it kind of fades out and disappears. Now that's fine, we can leave it like that. So as I said, we are going to just very quickly go into our ground area down here, that layer there. We're going to go to our colors and go top left of the palette, and we are just going to make sure, probably with around about 13% brush size, we get this much darker in here. Like this, we don't want to be able to dictate where that tree comes into play, nor do I want to know as well like where the well is connected. So if I set the brush size to like a 20%, I can also create like a bit of a drafted off shadow like towards the back here, so that it just kind of just pushes its way backwards. That should sort of cement it to the ground a little bit more as well, just kind of give you that shadow. And then we kind of just add a bit of texture to the top before we move into the autumnal tones. So that layer that you created above, that has all of your sort of grey lining on it, you can tap on it and alpha lock it so we can just stay on the same layer. And then let's work at the very top, for example. We want to go ahead and just add in texture. So let's go to our colours and grab the top of the third column. With Chano brush still, we're just going to give it a light sort of stroke of colour all the way across, just so we've got some dark tones to bounce some highlights off of, and vary up the slates as well, because they would 100% vary. You know, I've got slates on my home and they all have different colours to them. Then a little bit of a kind of shadow towards the underside of the top ridge line here, and then a little bit towards the top of a row. So this middle row here, I'm just adding in some colour to the top of the row there, and the top of the row here as well, because you've got the overhanging shadow from above. So that just gives you like a little bit of extra 3D look to it. Then go to your colours and we start working in these additional tones again. So let's maybe just jump to the middle now of the fourth column. Let's get that size up to probably 14-20%. Tapping away on top of the tiles, again towards like the bottom edges where now we know we want our highlight to live, because you've just added in your shadow towards the underside, haven't you? So just like random light varying pressures throughout the whole of all of these. Again, like some may just, like that one, just like get a lot brighter, and that's fine. You can brighten up the very top edge of the overhang. You could probably go bigger. So what size is this? Sorry, this is a size of 20%. And then we could just run that like horizontally if you want to, just to get some generalized texture across the whole of it. There we go. It's got a little bit lighter. We can always trim it down, of course, don't forget, in a second. Let's then go to our colors. So let's grab the bottom of the third column there. Probably want to be around about 13%, so I can be a bit more sort of particular with the tiles. And I'm just going to brighten them up, especially on this left-hand side where we're ultimately going to end up with our like brightest tiles because of the light falling down, and over the top as well up there too. A little bit of colour, tapping and pushing, texture. Let's get this one a bit brighter, shall we? Lovely. Oh, look at that. Lovely bit of texture. A little wiggle of texture and colour here and there. Again, you can always introduce shadows in a minute, so don't worry if you overdo your highlights. You can always go back. Little speckle of something, I think, trickling its way through the trees. But ultimately, if you can leave the right-hand side a bit darker, it will look better. Then let's go to our colours. Now you do have this much brighter tone here. Now be very particular with this. So it's bottom of the fourth column. You want your brush size to be like a 3%, and you want to just kind of add in like a bright edge to here, maybe a little bit towards that edge, and then maybe just like the edge of some of your roof tiles here. You kind of like little couple of specks of detail there, and there's like the very edge where the light is just landing and illuminating the side profile. And then you could do the same up the top as well, like a little bit of lighting as you curve it round. So you curve it round this one and onto there, and then a little bit on the top, and then that just gradually just falls away to the right hand side, like the detail just trickles off, and that's fine. You know, a couple of the ones maybe up towards the top get a little bit more light on those edges. And you can create like little patches running across that are just catching some light, like a scuff or a scrape here and there as it's worn over time. You know, just a bit of damage perhaps, maybe a branch fell on it once. And then let's go to our colours. Let's grab the top of the third column. Let's get that brush size down to like a 7%, and you just want to sort of start to bring back in your shadows again over on that right hand side, and just maybe just start to think about darkening up quite a few of them if possible, just with some extra texture, maybe a bit more towards the bottom edge here as well, just to kind of let that light fall over the edge. Underneath your lines that you created, maybe you need to darken them up again even more. You know, maybe go to like 14% and just like create a big overhanging shadow. There we go, just to really define how like top down that is. Beautiful, love that. In a similar way, you're then going to make your way into these as well. So you're on the same layer, you can just darken up at the bottom. This is really simple to do, to be honest with you. You can then darken up on the right, and then go to your colours, grab the middle of the fourth column, 7% brush size. You can just trickle in some highlight on those top edges. Again, just like as always, just kind of fades off to the right hand side, much brighter on the left. Lovely. That's nice. And then you can also grab your brighter tone if you want, like the bottom of the third column, get a bit brighter again in there, and maybe just like the edge of some of your stones and the top edge perhaps, just bringing that lighting round. It's a very simple amount of texture, to be honest with you. And then grab your dark tone again, top of the third column, and then in those lines, break up any like really grey patches, but in the lines, especially in between, just like a little shadow in between them. There we go. That just nicely creates like a 3D looking object. There we go. Now I want to go ahead and just add in a very simple amount of texture here as well. So we'll go to our colours and grab the middle of the fourth column, brush probably about 12% and just a little bit of like lighter tone towards the bottom. And that's honestly probably it. Like the wood, we don't want to sort of bring in too much. We just want to keep it really subtle. And then over here on the right hand side, you just need to go ahead and grab your shadow tone, top of the third column, and then just darken up the right and the bottom, because again, that light just fades way off over here. Now we do need to create like a random second layer. So let's create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. And then go to your colors and grab the gray in the middle of the, in fact, we can probably go middle of the fourth column, size about 7%. And then just over here on the far edge, just keep tapping and pushing to create like almost like a sort of the edge up here of some bricks, etc. And on there too, but not a lot, just a little bit. I want it to be very subtle, just like a little nod towards the light on the opposite side, and that's fine. And then we get into the beautiful autumnal part of this. So we can go right up to our top of our layers and create a new layer. This sits above everything. You can go to your colors. We've got these beautiful tones to add in. So let's grab the middle of the second column. Your brush wants to go back to the deep north brush. Again, if you need it, find, and it's in grunge, very top. Size 17% just to start with up here, and tap and push in your autumnal tones. Now, to be honest with you, they're probably a little bit too big. I probably want to go to like a 4% and be much more meticulous with adding in the color and purposeful with it. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I can press really firm and get some big coverage, but I could also press really light and add in some much needed smaller sizes as well. And this is where, of course, our design really comes to life. Lovely autumnal tones. So take your time to like layer this all in, come across the tree as well. You know, there's a branch perhaps just in front of it. You never need to leave your tree trunk like completely exposed, otherwise it just doesn't look like it's a 3D object, you know. Leaves will be coming towards us at the same time. We've got these darker tones of these like oranges to add in, and then of course we just really go to town and add in even more of the brighter tones in a second. Let's get some leaves on here as well. They land on top of our little well. They sort of gather on the top edge, so like a little cluster of them, a couple of little specks, and they just land and they've fallen on top of the well. They land on the very edge as well over here. Lovely stuff. Let's maybe just add like a couple on the very corner there, and then all of your orange tones are also going to fall down. And also, not only that, they're also going to be like the color of the leaves and plants down here. So I'm tapping to introduce some orange in here. I'm going to add in some like orange with a bit more of a horizontal push, just so that they kind of almost look like flowers to a degree. Scattering in these in here, varying sizes with my pressure. Just bringing out some lovely autumnal tones. And you probably want to think about also where in a minute would I want to introduce some more of the line detail work that we did beforehand. And then vary up your size, and you can go to like an 8% and just scatter in some like fallen ones in the gaps, or just press firmer. It's totally up to you. I'm gonna add in a few more there. That looks good. We have got multiple colors to introduce though, so don't go adding in too much of this in terms of, so you've got too much. You know, keep it subtle to start with. These are our darker tones at the end of the day, so they can go in the darkest areas, and then we can leave our highlighted areas to introduce some much needed yellows and brighter, warmer tones. A little cluster of colour there, look lovely, and already it looks so fun, but we can move into some more colours. Now, as always, you can tap on this layer and alpha lock it and just simply colour in what you've already done, or you can draw straight on top. So we're going to go ahead and move to this colour here. It's the top of the second column, and again, we're just going to get into some of those. So if you alpha locked it, you basically can only colour in what you've already drawn, therefore you're not adding anything else to the design. So that way you keep it lovely and like thin. You're not adding in too much like thickness of the color, but that's totally up to you. So you can decide how that looks. By all means, add like a few like falling ones over here as well. It will make it look like it's a windy day, and it will explain also how they get down here as well. You can tell a whole story. Now I'm going to add a few over to this side, but not a lot. Tapping and pushing, a bit horizontal, but then also at like different angles as well to create like leaves throughout the whole of the scene. And this is probably one of my favorite autumnal designs I've made so far. I do have a lot of them at the minute. I'm just enjoying this whole style. My Patreon has some exclusive ones as well, if you want to go ahead and check that out, that are coming throughout the whole of November. But obviously if you're watching this a bit later, they're already out. So make sure to check out my website, because that's exactly where you can see every single Patreon exclusive tutorial before you join. That way you know if like there's tutorials that actually fit your fancy or not. So there we go, we've got some lovely colour in there. I'm going to leave it a little bit less than I want, because I want to make sure I can add in like yellows afterwards. Some of these I'm going to brighten up by just drawing on top of them. Adding in some more, perhaps like another one there maybe. Just a speckle of orange. In fact, I will undo that one. And then get into here. I'm going to keep tapping just to create like a few more little colourful plant-like leaves, and you can have them go up in like a formation if you want to create like a plant of sort. Again, you don't need to determine, oh, is this a type of flower? Is this a type of... It doesn't matter. It's just an autumnal painting of your creation, of your world. It doesn't matter. So that's looking good. I can move over to here as well. I'm going to go up some of those stems, some of those little dashes that we did earlier on. Keeping the highlight colours a little closer towards the edge. You can add a few in here as well, it's not a problem, but just like if you can keep them towards the edge, they'll look absolutely fantastic. Maybe like a couple in the ground as well, again on top of some of your leaves. It will just give you the colour, and look, oh, it's so pretty. Let's go to our colours. Let's grab the bottom of the second column now and get into our autumnal yellow tones. So now we can start to push and bring out the brightness and the yellow. This probably wants to be the majority of your tree, to be honest with you, but you know, it's up to you. You're totally in control. I always love to give you options in my tutorials. You can depict where you want detail, where you want the colors, where you want to do X, Y, and Z. There's loads of effects that I tend to do, and then I say, right, you can pick. And if you didn't already know, I make a weekly video here on my YouTube channel for Procreate every single week. So if you're not subscribed, by the way, like 75% of people watching this are not subscribed, you're missing out. You're potentially missing out. Let's just go along the top edge here, maybe brighten up a few of those. I'll just add in a few more like scattered in there. And then over here, probably not going to add too much. Like I'll add in a few. I don't want the shadows to be like done in too much. And then I'm just going to add in a few more yellow bits over here, mainly towards that edge, and up some of those like little reeds there, and maybe just like a few in here, just to add in some variety. Now you can always switch back to your colors. You can always grab the middle orange again if you want to like patch in a few more leaves like on top of here. I want to have like a cluster of leaves just sat on that top edge, but using the dark tone, I then have the option if I want then to go back to yellow and draw on top of them to add in more colors. But the orange is like your base tone for your leaves. Now the only thing I think I'm going to do is grab my selection tool. I'm going to use freehand, and I'm probably going to make a big cutout up here. Select all of those leaves, grab my cursor. I'm going to use uniform. I'm going to make them bigger. I'm going to push them outwards a bit more, over towards the left hand side of the scene a little bit more. That's just going to make the tree coverage a bit bigger, and then I can always go back in there then and start adding in some more leaves if I feel like it's necessary now to cover up some of the darkness. But I think it looks okay, to be honest with you. It gives it a nice natural thinning look. I'm going to also bring some leaves a little bit lower down in here, you know, maybe onto this plant, this tree over here, should I say, just hanging on the edge of our scene. And so there's only a couple of things I would probably tidy up. This bottom right corner here, if I go down to our like ground layer here, go to my colors and grab the top left of the palette, go back to my brush, go back to the top, and I think we'll just use something like either Mountain Lilac or Baceno, probably Baceno. size 20%. I'm going to push up and outwards. I want to darken this up a bit more in behind our well, maybe just a few taps here just to add in something, but I want to darken up this corner much more so that that tree just pops out from like a growth of sort down in there. And then you do also have the options, like as always, to go to like the very top of your layers. We'll try it in front for a minute. At the very top, we'll go to our layers, create a new layer, go to your brush, should I say, basics, and the Forester brush, which is basically a soft air brush. 24% brush size. You probably just want to go ahead and just triple check we're on a new layer. Just wrap that color around at the bottom, just kind of creating a bit more of a vignette down in here, and then maybe a tad of color just over there as well, just ever so slight, and just maybe a little bit more darkness up in the top of the tree, just to, again, focus your attention on where you want it to be. Now, all in all, I'm really happy with that, so I'm going to pinch with 2 fingers, I'm going to go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. I hope you enjoyed this autumnal design. As always, like I said, check out my channel for more tutorials, but also check out my Patreon, because that's where I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. The catalogue sits at nearly 160 at the time of recording, and again, with 3 added every single month, that collection just continues to grow. And as I said, if you enjoyed this video here on YouTube, you'll love these ones on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.